The Senate Judiciary Committee is expected to meet soon to discuss hearings on Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. President Joe Biden announced Jackson as a Supreme Court nominee late last week. Jackson is no stranger to the Senate, recently getting confirmed to her current position on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit, with all Democrats as well as 3 Republicans confirming that nomination. If confirmed by the Senate this time, Jackson would make history as the first black woman to serve on the nation's highest court. And joining us now with more are Joseph Morris, partner at the law firm Morris and De La Rosa and a former Assistant Attorney General under President Reagan. And for transparency, we should note that Mr. Morris is also the chair of WTTW's Community Advisory Board. David Franklin, Associate Professor of Law at DePaul University. Franklin clerked for Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Corey Carew, Chief Inclusion and Diversity Officer at Seyfarth Shaw. And Audra Wilson, President and CEO of the Shriver Center on Poverty Law. Welcome all of you to Chicago Tonight. Audra Wilson, I'll start with you. Your reaction to the nomination of Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson.
Well, thank you. And as I had said before, when I had an opportunity to talk about the possibility of nominating a black woman, I knew about Judge Jackson. I knew she was on the short list. She has the most impressive and impeccable of credentials: Radcliffe, Harvard Law, having clerked for 3 federal judges, including Justice Breyer himself. So I think this is an amazing nomination. I knew it was coming, and I just hope that she is not going to be having to deal with a lot of the things that are already, some of the backlash and things that are coming from conservatives with her nomination.
And David Franklin, you knew her personally. While she clerked for Breyer, you were clerking for Justice Ginsburg. What was your impressions of her? What were your impressions of her?
Yeah, Ketanji, as we called her then, or Judge Jackson, as I'll call her now, is terrific. She is thorough, detail-oriented. She's a terrific researcher and writer. And she also happened to be one of the most popular law clerks. She's just warm and has a terrific energy about her, just a very kind person. And I would expect that if she's confirmed, she'll probably share Justice Breyer's sort of pragmatic focus on problem solving. But she also might have some of Justice Sotomayor's willingness to speak her mind on matters that are deeply important to her. So it'll be interesting to see if she's confirmed just what kind of justice she turns out to be.
And Joe Morris, I was going to ask you that, is there anything from her decisions in her lower court positions that give you a sense of what her judicial philosophy might be?
Well, I've looked at her lower court decisions, and first of all, let me say I am delighted to see the nomination by President Biden of a judge who will come to the Supreme Court with an unusual background for a Supreme Court justice. She's been a trial judge. She was a trial judge in the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia, as she's now an appellate judge. So she will have served at all 3 levels of the federal judiciary, and that's an unusual career path for a Supreme Court justice. I think that's a wonderful thing. She has made a valiant effort to accommodate herself to the stream of legal thinking that goes by the term originalism or textualism. In several opinions that she wrote as a district judge, and in her one major opinion as a Court of Appeals judge, she has shown an ability to apply that technique, that approach to judicial reasoning. I do not see, however, a clear judicial philosophy emerging from her judicial record. I do not know her personally. I have read her decisions. What I see in her written decisions is a very smart, very intelligent judge whose work is well within the mainstream of the American legal tradition. If I were a member of the Senate, a Republican member of the Senate from the state of Illinois, based on what I know about Judge Jackson today, I would vote in favor of confirming her.
And we'll see if there is bipartisan support here. Corey Carew, Joe mentioned her unusual background here, also served as a public defender. What do you think this diversity of experience will mean for her judicial philosophy if she is confirmed?
Thank you very much for that question. You know, her diversity of experience, as well as the diversity that she brings as a person from an underrepresented group, is definitely going to lend itself to bring in different perspectives to her decision making, as well as the discussions with the fellow justices on the bench. We know that our experiences definitely shape the lenses through which we see and how we judge. And of course, as lawyers, we are bound by precedent. We don't get to go off and make up the rules as we wish. Having that diversity of experience as a public defender, having trial experience and having served in the public sector as well as the private sector is going to bring a very well-rounded lens to the decision-making process. And that's just a wonderful thing that we're thankful for.
And David Franklin, we mentioned that she's no stranger to this process with the U.S. Senate, confirmed twice before for the Circuit and Appellate Court. She got bipartisan support the last time around about 9 months ago. Do you think that there will be a bipartisan path to confirmation this time around?
I don't know. In theory, it doesn't matter as long as the Democrats hold their votes together, because the vice president can cast the deciding vote. I would hope that she would get the support of Republican senators who think like Joe Morris, but I'm not going to hold my breath about that. I think we live in an incredibly polarized time. But I do think that regardless of whether she's confirmed or not, she's going to be in the minority, in dissent, in case after case, because there's a 6-3 conservative supermajority on this court. And it's a court that is reaching out to decide cases in all kinds of controversial areas, be it affirmative action, abortion, gun rights, et cetera, where I expect that at least for the first several years, a Judge Jackson will find herself to be more of a voice crying in the wilderness than the kind of consensus builder that I think her mind and her personality sort of cuts her out to be.
Right, replacing Justice Breyer, certainly not expected to change that 6-3 balance. Audra, do you foresee any kind of road bump to her path to confirmation?
I tend to agree with David. It's really difficult to say. I know a lot of the rhetoric that has come out, and including very racist rhetoric, suggesting that people should be nominated for what they do and not how they were born, which is interestingly because this is why she was nominated for what she does and her impressive and impeccable credentials. But unfortunately, thinking of the nature of politics today and how partisan things are and the undercurrent of racism is that, yes, I think there are going to be some attacks on her that really have nothing to do with those credentials. They're going to be much more ideologically driven. But I am hoping that there are going to be some voices of reason that realize that there's really no reason to assail her character or her credentials, that she is probably far more qualified than many people in recent history who have been at least nominated. So I'm hoping, I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that there's going to be some voices of reason.
And Joe Morris, President Biden did get some pushback for promising that it would be an African-American woman, and he made this promise on the campaign trail in South Carolina. Do you agree with that approach?
No, I think the racist in this picture is Joe Biden. I think it was shameful that Joe Biden, in effect, made Judge Jackson an affirmative action nominee. She deserves to be considered on the merits of her credentials, on the merits of her personality, on the merits of her mind, on the merits of her work as a lawyer and as a judge. I think it was a mistake for President Biden to say that she was being nominated simply because of her race and her sex. I also thought it was a mistake for my boss, President Reagan, to say that he was nominating Justice O'Connor, Senator Day O'Connor, the first woman on the court, simply because of her sex. That's wrong. Judge Jackson should not go down in history as an affirmative action asterisk. She has the ability to go down in history as a very serious and accomplished judge. And by the way, the 6-3 votes are things that happen importantly only at the margins. The vast amount of the work of the court is arrived at by decisions that are much closer, much bigger than that. That is, they're often what we would call in a political context, and this is not one, a bipartisan majority. Often the court is unanimous. Often there are alignments of the justices that go outside that 6-3 nominally partisan arrangement. I think it's important to understand that the judges are not meant to be representatives. They're meant to decide questions of law based on decisions made by other people, Congress, the Constitution, people who write contracts and wills and so forth, that are external to the judges. If I have any criticism of the representation, the lack of diversity in the nomination of Judge Jackson, it is her law school. She will be yet another Harvard lawyer on the court. There are currently 4 Harvard lawyers and 4 Yale lawyers on the court, and only 1 lawyer from anywhere else, and that's Judge
Notre
Barrett
Dame.
from the Midwest. From Notre
Right.
Dame.
Seems like Harvard, Yale, the pipeline to Supreme Court. Corey Carew, at the same time, though, how impactful is it that she is the first African-American woman on the Supreme Court? Or she would be?
Oh, it's supremely impactful. I mean, the fact of the matter is the Supreme Court has been dominated by white men, and white men are not the only form, gender, and color that excellence looks like in this country. And so this is where I would disagree with Attorney Morris, that by emphasizing that he was going to appoint a Black woman, what Joe Biden was doing was recognizing that there are immensely qualified Black women out there who have not been considered, because otherwise it would be to assume that the excellence that we see on our Supreme Court really only comes in one color and gender, and that's not accurate. The importance of this is thinking about it through this lens, that we live in a country that has made a promise around liberty and equality that has not been true for many, many people. And to see a Black woman on the Supreme Court, not just a Black woman, but a dark-skinned Black woman, and not just a dark-skinned Black woman, but a dark-skinned Black woman that wears her hair naturally, right? It's something that we don't see, especially for people like me who have children who, for example, had a Black teacher for the first time in their entire lives last year, or who on the television and don't see people like them.
Right.
It's someone who comes from a group that faces additional hurdles and challenges in the legal profession, in our society, and in our community. And so it's not just a reflection of achievement for the communities that she represents, but also an achievement for us as a country, that we are at a place that color is being allowed to shine in the same way that we have seen happen for the majority.
And we'll continue to follow this confirmation process and hopefully talk to all of you again. And our thanks for now to Joseph Morris, David Franklin, Corey Carew, and Audra Wilson. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.